For all the murderers, a lament of the dead. For a ounce of cocaine or some marijuana, you killed your friend Claude. For leaving his terrain and crossing to Mova, you spilled Richard's blood. An ex-drug dealer you attacked because he sell you some bad crack. So you hide in the dark and commit a brutal act. That's a fact. On your URP job you want double pay for doing nothing. Before man say no, so you blow up the head to win. Raging, but murder are you committing? Besides murder, a greater sin. For the things you preventing that dead man from seeing. Yes, for just because of your stupidity, that dead man didn't see Latapi weaving his magic amongst them Yankee when we gave them tree. And just because of your damn foolishness, those you kill will forever miss Thompson winning silver in the Olympics. And just because of your damn ignorance, dead men didn't see Usain Bolt dance when he broke the world record with arrogance. But your greatest sin, Mr. Killer, is that you prevented our black brother from seeing this century's greatest history drama. Because of you, men see the tears of Oprah.
You stop men from seeing Barack Obama.
Just because your girlfriend talked to another man, you blew out his brains. And because Mr. Ken disagree with your plans, you slew him like Cain. And next man you attacked because you didn't like his act. So you hide in the trap and commit that brutal act. That's a fact. One of your boys was killed while walking on George Street, just so one night. So you walk in the area and blow up two of them. Boom, boom, first fight. It's a pity you cannot see that beyond your murderous spree, the folks you kill will never see momentous history. Yes. But just because of your damn stupidness, those you killed didn't get to witness all those men who ran in the New York's business. And just because of your foolish action, the dead didn't see Jesse Jackson weep and cry for the rise of the African. And because of that gun you were carrying, dead men didn't see Black Stalin get his doctorate from UE for doing his thing. You make men see Michelle Obama through the front of the White House enter, not as a maid, but as First Lady, brother. Because of you, men see history register.
You stop men from seeing Barack Obama.
Just a few years ago, Africans were murdered like dogs in the States. Many were killed just so, for some lie, Lord forbid, that whites fabricate. Trying to vote made whites upset. So many blacks were burned to death. And whilst they were burning, the Ku Klux Klan danced and fed. Oh yes, was the whip and them dogs when Africans demanded their human rights. Was the jail and curtail for trying to speak to whites polite. So look here, Mr. Murderer, men have died to see what you saw. In their time, blacks couldn't pass through the White House back door. For just because of your damn idleness, those you killed didn't get to witness. Africans in the U.S. voting, where once they were killed for this. And because of that gun, my brother, those you killed will never see Ganga, and his voice win a million in Antigua. And because of your criminal doing, that men get to see Hillary Clinton serving as Secretary of State to a black skin. You make men see Michelle Obama dressed so beautiful last winter at State Hall where her grandma couldn't enter. Because of your gun, men see the tears of Oprah.
You stop men from seeing Barack Obama
alive.
Dr. Hollis Liverpool, the chalk dust. Dr. Hollis Liverpool, the mighty chalk dust. Lament of the Dead, what you call the classic calypso, capturing the historic moment of the rise of the black skin, according to him. You make men then see Hillary Clinton serving as Secretary of State for black skin, reminding us of that moment. I know where I was, and all of you who were alive at that time knew where you were when Barack Hussein Obama became President of the United States of America. It was more than just the presidency. It was a moment in history. And the Calypsonians seized that moment to talk about violence within our community, what they call black and black violence, to comment on how violence is destroying our community, and arguing that the victims of violence in our Caribbean, in black communities, prevented men, mostly men, from being part of history. He hardly talked about Obama, but he used the Obama moment to talk about Black women. Oh, Michelle Obama looks so nice and beautiful, walking through State House where a mother had to go through the back door. Talked about Michelle Obama twice in that calypso. Black womanhood. Talked about African-American history, how they were lynched for just watching a white woman. As late as 1954, Emmett Till, a 15-year-old boy, just said, "Bye, baby." Went in to buy some candy in a store. Said, "Bye, baby." And that was enough for him to be murdered and lowered down the bottom of the Mississippi River, Money, Mississippi. He was visiting there from Chicago. And his mother insisted on an open casket as the body went from Money, Mississippi to Chicago. And the world saw what Black people were going through up to 1954. And there's the Calypsonian capturing that moment, using the Obama moment to remind us of history, historical memory, to remind us that although we were electing a president, we were still killing ourselves in our communities. Because of your damn stupidness, men and see the tears of Oprah. Men and see the tears of Jesse Jackson. They all cried. I cried. I remember crying like a baby. Because if anyone had told me before 2008 that a Black man would have become president of the United States, I would have told them, go to hell. I didn't believe it. All those Black people who said, I knew that Obama, the lie. The force of history. And as Mr. Trump ascends to the presidency again, the least we can do is have our own inauguration. Remember the Barack Obama moment. Kamala Harris did not get there, but we were there before. Dr. King, the night before he was murdered, was feeling feverish. They urged him to leave the hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, the Lorraine Hotel, and to go down to the church to speak. And whoa, what a speech. I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, my people, but I know that we are going to get there. Jesse Jackson was with him on that fateful evening in April of 1968. 40 years later, Jesse Jackson cried a second time. He cried in 1968 because the drum major of peace was snatched away by the assassin's bullet. 40 years later, he cried because the prophecy of the drum major had come through. We can talk about what Obama did when he was in office and what he didn't do. That's fair game. That's political analysis. But that should not overshadow the importance of the moment. In 2015, when the coalition took office, if you've asked many of us if it were possible, be honestly would have told you it was difficult, but we did it. We did it in 2015. And whatever we think about what happened between 2015 and 2020, what they did wrong and what they did right and what they didn't do wrong, it was an important moment because we overthrew a machinery. 2025, we are called once again to perform an important feat. Dr. Martin Luther King, in a couple of weeks, will celebrate his birth anniversary. His birth anniversary. Had he lived, he would have been 96 years old. When he died, he was merely 39. And the autopsy showed that he had the heart of a 60-something-year-old, carrying the burden of Black people, oppressed people all over the world, showing us the way that we could see through. You know, people have the right to make choices, have the right to belong to which party they want to belong to. They have the right to change their mind. I no longer want to be with this party, I'm going to go with that party. But when you begin to use other people to justify why you gone, I have a problem with that. You have a right to go. PPP people have a right if they want to leave and come to the PNC or AFC or wherever, that's their right. And PNC and AFC and WPA people got a right if they want to go to the PPP. When we listen to people like Freddie Kissoon, I am with the PPP because in 2020, the world almost came to an end. An ordinary Black man from Maikoni caused the world almost to end. And I had an epiphany. And I run to the PPP. You went to the PPP because you want to go there. What happened in 2020 is because of the PPP's doing. But my friend Freddie Kissoon cannot say, I changed my mind. Because he has to then explain why he changed his mind. And sometimes that is difficult. Because it's unpleasant. Sometimes people make political choices for personal reasons. Good evening to you and welcome to Politics 101. Don't get me going tonight. It's Friday night. Let me go and eat my potato ball, my egg ball, my black pudding, my sauce. Let me go and eat my thing in peace. Don't get me going. Good evening to you, whether you're joining us from inside of Guyana, beautiful Guyana. And when some of us say beautiful Guyana, we mean it. We don't mean a beauty in big buildings and fancy road that will break up tomorrow. We're talking about what Guyana represents, something beautiful. Those of us who travel up and down, and that's mean almost all of us. No matter what state our country is, when you land at Timeri, at Chedi Jagan, a weight just come off your back, your chest. You feel a surge. You know why? Because Guyana is home. can't call me an immigrant in Guyana. Although I migrated there, my people went against their will, but I am no longer an immigrant in Guyana. I am Guyanese. That's what, when we say, oh, beautiful Guyana, that's the beauty that we're talking about. The soul of Guyana, the psyche of Guyana, what Guyana can be. Come with me. Come with us. Come off the fence. We got work to do. A differently abled Guyanese joined the WPA this week. Because he's differently abled, he has to vote by proxy. And he said, I'm giving my proxy to the WPA. Could have given it to the PNC, the AFC. You all know my story, going in the same pot. But if someone who's differently abled can say, I am coming off the fence, and I'm coming into the trench, something is moving. Something is moving in the soul of Guyana. We all sang. That's Sankey. A little bit more, a little bit oil in my lamp. Keep it burning. A little bit oil in my lamp. Keep it burning. Keep it burning until the break of day. Soon come, the Jamaicans say. Soon come. Soon come. Good evening to all of you, and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. It is night in Europe. I don't know how you all do it, but you all do it every night. You all in this thing. And when you all done here, you all gone to Sherrod. And when you all done with Sherrod, you all gone to Mark and still wake up in the morning for Kidaki. Human service. Welcome to Politics 101. We've been away from you for a little while. So you all had your Friday, couple of Fridays we were gone. Christmas, you know. It's a way in which we Caribbean people have turned Christmas from just being a Christian moment to a deeply cultural moment. The birth of the Christ child represents a bright light. And that's why come 4 months from now, when we celebrate Easter, with the prosecution of the Christ child, and it's overcoming on the third morn, rising again. We shall rise again. We will rise again. House slaves notwithstanding, we shall rise again. Not because we feel Guyana belongs to us alone, but because we feel for Guyana. Let me bring in my brother, because I keep forgetting that it's not my Friday night, it's his Friday night. The man from Christiansburg. Dr. Adams.
Hey, how are you doing, Dr. Hines? It's been a while.
You had your time in church. I didn't know if you went to St. Aidan's. The first time I went there, my auntie took me to St. Aidan's.
No, I was you remember I went to Christiansburg. The Christiansburg Church is Church of Scotland.
Tell it again. Because we had a church at Scott's Church.
Scott George, that's right. That's
And
right.
they had they used to, the boys, they used to play volleyball and sports and so on. I think that they used to encourage a lot of that youth thing. They had perhaps the most vibrant youth organization of all the churches. But tell us about the Scots Church.
Well, and the Christianborg Primary School, where we went to school in Christianborg, the church was right in the yard, right at the front of the school. As a matter of fact, the land and stuff was donated. It was the church of, the church property. So that's where the government, the primary school was built. And it's interesting that you mentioned the encouragement of youth participation. Well, guess who was in charge of all we little boys? Robert Corbin. Robert Corbin, the former,
leader of the PNC, yes.
Chair. Robert was bigger than us. So he was in charge of all the youths with Sunday school and everything else. So it was kind of funny. You better be nice with Robert, right? Because we had this tower that you had to climb up and ring the bell. So you better be nice to Robert and give him whatever favors you want to get to go up, to climb up the ladder to ring the bell. But Robert, the other thing about Robert, I'm sure that if he's listening, but well, Robert was ahead of us, a few classes. So Robert left. He took common entrance. He went to Mackenzie High School. So I was in the scholarship class later on to take the common entrance to go to Mackenzie High School. When you're in common entrance, you have late lessons and that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Robert would be finished from his high school, Mackenzie High, across the river, and Robert would come over. And he would be standing in front of the school waiting until school is over. Our lessons is over, myself and two other guys waiting until for us to play bat and ball. But Robert used to bring his own bat and ball. So you better be nice to him again, because he's got control of the whole game. and so he wants the bat force. Of course, that was the rule. He had the bat force. And even when he out, you would argue that he's not out. You got to pull him down. So Robert was a politician since his young days. He was that type of a politician, and the man know to leverage his power.
No, but it's interesting that you say that. I like so many boys of our generation and yours grew up in the church, and I was an altar boy from I was 6 or 7 years old. 7 years old. In fact, I became an altar boy before I conformed. I conformed with my the surplice and cassock at English Church there. And my really first introduction to politics, as it were, was really in that church. Canon Hemmerdin, David Hemmerdin from Litchfield, he was there in Buxton. He used to call him Father Money because he come and meet the whole church. He collect money and he build up the church and things. So they used to call him Father Money. And when Father Money, they on the bicycle, he go around for gift communion. When me auntie and got to church Sunday, when she hear Father coming, she duck on the bed, because when you don't go to church, he stop at every house and thing. And my first sense of politics was from there in church, and I didn't know anything then about liberation theology. It came much later, but those fellows were really steeped in liberation theology, in the way in which they were able to weave together a critique of the world, a critique of the country, and do it within the confines and the context of the Bible in a progressive way. Today we hear about the church in the United States and so on, and how the church is anti-progressive and so on. We can say that our church coming into the 1960s and the 1970s has become quite progressive. Your thoughts?
Oh yes, absolutely. I remember. I mean, that's the kind of thing that grounded me, and many folks were like myself. You didn't grow up as a little kid. You didn't grow up even, without without being grounded in the church. I remember as a little boy, even though I love cricket and all kinds of sport, on Sunday morning, you better go to church, and then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you better go to Sunday school. And on top of that, you better in between you got to pong fufu, or else you can't go and play. So you better be able to regulate your time, because you got to go to on Sunday. You go to church, you come back home, you got to pong fufu. Um, then between in the between now, you want to go play your cricket and stuff like that. Then you got to go 3 o'clock for Sunday school. So yes, you are absolutely correct. But those are the kind of things we never realized it at the time, that we took for granted. But a lot of what we became was grounded in that church, um, and just the moralities and everything that you have to live by. And it's hard for you to deviate. You got to behave yourself and do the things that are right. I'm not saying that you got to be, like a really dedicated Christian, but at least there's some basic values that gets ingrained in you, that helps you along the way. And I don't care whether it's in your academic or sports or anything else. That's ingrained in you in anything that you do. That you do. So no, it's a great foundation for any young person to build on.
Yes, Dr. Vincent Adams here on a Friday evening, talking about the role of the church, in socialization, and certainly the church, like any other institution, goes through the changes, adapts to the changes that is happening. One of the criticism of today's church in Guyana is the way in which the churches become part of the hustling mentality, sucking up to governments and so on and so forth. And there is that conversation that is going on. Dr. Adams, last week, Vice President Barack Jack Dio, as his followers say, Jack Deo, Dr. Jack Deo. I don't know about the doctor, but the Jack Deo, is a reference. Mr. Jack Deo said that it's the political season, and if you're getting into politics, he's prepared to go to blows against those who are coming up against the PPP. And your party, the AFC, picked up on it at its press conference last week. But lo and behold, before the week was out, there were some targets, it seems, as a result of Mr. Jack Deo gauntlet that he has thrown down. And you happen to be one of the first persons that they have gone after. Former AFC member Leonard Craig, I watched in dismay as he sat on that TV set and sought to minimize your contribution to Guyana, saying that you don't know the difference between cast oil and some oil. And what is wrong with this boy? And as I said to you as we were coming on, I don't mind Brother Leonard deciding that, look, he won't go and join the PPP. This is right. But by God, why you cussing up your brothers and sisters that you sat and had supper with, and then deliberately using supper because I'm staying on the biblical story? And then you're seeking not only to deny them, but to demonize and criminalize them. Doc, what do I want with you? what do I want with you? Tell me.
Well, let's say you're in a battle, Dr. Hines. What would be your target? Isn't that the biggest? You would go after your biggest threat, right? And the biggest threat for the PPP right now are facts and competence. They've already established there is no competence and they do not come with facts. And so I would like for people like Mr. Leonard and whoever else are out there, let them show where they're, let them put their qualifications on the table. None of them have ever done a single hour, an hour or even a second of training or any knowledge based um, thinking or ability in petroleum engineering or petroleum science or anything to do with petroleum, oil and gas, or the environment. None. And so that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with emptiness versus highly credentialed people. Okay. And I don't like touting my horn, Dr. Hines, but for them to be to even be to say, but we know I would suspect that they know what they're doing. I don't think that they're that stupid and ignorant that it has to be willful. Because here's somebody with, and again, I don't like to talk, it feels uncomfortable sometimes, with a PhD in environmental engineering, with over 30, well, about 47 years total, PhD in environmental engineering, uh, two master's degree, one in petroleum engineering, and with, was a PhD candidate in petroleum engineering. So I almost got two PhDs in petroleum engineering and um, and environmental engineering, a master's degree also in geological engineering, and with 47 years of experience in those fields, with pioneering work in petroleum engineering, was at the highest level of the US government, the highest level in the civilian service of the United States government. As a general, well, it's a senior executive service corps, which is the equivalent of the generals in the military. And I'm not making this up. If you go to the Office of Personnel Management, and there's a table there that shows the general ranking on one side and the civilian ranking on the other side. And the generals are equivalent to the SES, which is the position that I am in. And the only people who come in and are above us are the political appointees, like the secretary, the deputy secretary, the undersecretary. Those are political appointees. They come and they go. But we're the career professionals who stay there, and we're the ones who run the day-to-day operations of the government. So when you hear all this foolishness, and just to show you, the SES core, just to put things into perspective, Dr. Hines, the United States government, the government employees, it's over 3 million employees. You hear me? It's over 3 million employees. That's about 4 times the population of Guyana. So the government employment force is over 3 million. Now, and that's a civilian, by the way, that's not counting the military. So within that 3 million, you've got 8,000 of us who are SES. 8,000, which is like 0.3%, 0.3%. So we're the ones who run that entire workforce. And of course, and I do not know if there's one other Guyanese that a lady that I learned when somebody else heard, they said, hey, I got this notice other lady who was all, that's the only other person. Then the other person was Colin Powell. You remember the famous Colin Powell? He was also, but of course he became a political appointee. So that's here it is that on top of that, Dr. Hines, I was respected among my peers throughout the world because I was the chairman of the chapter of the largest environmental organization of professionals. I was the chairman of the US chapter, and I was the chairman of 2 major international conferences on the environment, one in Kazakhstan and one in Germany. I represented the United States at these conferences as head of the delegation of the United States in these areas. So for people to come on, when I worked for American Oil Company, which is now British Petroleum, I was responsible for developing new technologies for enhancing oil recovery. So when you put all that together, so for me to be getting into an argument with these folks who do not have a single hour or a single second in any of that training and development, I mean, it's like talking to a kindergarten kid and trying. I mean, it's I don't know how it's not easy to be having a discussion or even a debate with a kindergarten child. So that is what this is here. How do you explain? And it's not a case where this issue is just something that's complicated. This matter that caused this all, it's a very simple matter, and so it's difficult. So for like Mr. Craig, for example, Mr. Craig, these guys have been complete failures. Mr. Craig, this is a fact. Mr. Craig was a member of the AFC. Mr. Craig under the AFC was working under Mr. Ramjatan in the Home Affairs Ministry. He was sent to China to study. I think I even understand that he was sent there for 2 years. They had to extend it because he said he needed more time on full salaries. He came back and he said that he had graduated, and apparently, and because of saying that he had graduated, he got a big bump up in salaries. And apparently, this year's alleged. Apparently, when this new PPP came into being, they discovered apparently that he did not graduate. Now, Mr. Craig needs to show the credentials as to where, if that is not true. And from what the word is that he was let go by the Home Affairs Ministry in the after the transition because of that. Now, the question the AFC asks that he needs to put it on the table. He needs to come clean and tell the people whether he graduated and what was the reason why he was released by this current administration. And then, of course, he was looking for a job, and I guess he's found one with the PPP. Now, I have no problem, Dr. Hines, with folks, whether they change their ideology or not, or whether they're in a bad position where, they've got to do what it is to take care of their family. That's okay. But go in peace and not coming back to bash, especially the hands that fed you. Now this guy wanted to be everything. He came back. He was even the deputy general secretary. He came back and he said, "Well, we had like 8 seats in parliament, so there was all, and we had to recommend. Meaning, when I say we, I mean the executive had to recommend who should be there." So he came back and he said, "Well, listen, we need to do this thing on some kind of a basis," and he was allowed to put together the criteria for we're not selecting. In his recommendation, he even had, well, okay, we're going to have an election. So every candidate had to put their names in, and then there was a vote for the 8 candidates. It ended up that he did not make the cut. He ended up way down after the number 8. So of course that really angered him, and I guess that's one of the things that drove him here into this. In addition to some other things that other folks had mentioned. So I guess that's what drove him here. But it's despicable that somebody could be going here. But on top of that, to be speaking on a subject, not only were you a failure because it shows that you're not studious in even doing what you were supposed to be doing on the taxpayers' dollars, and to come back and to be criticizing people who are, I wouldn't even say qualified, who are eminently qualified, and not even a comparison with you, to be talking in areas that they have spent their entire lives doing and even developing technology. Because as part of my dissertation, as you know, and you write your dissertations and your theses, you've got to come up with new stuff, and you got to come up with new science in your area. You got to come up with something new. You just can't go copy from someplace else, and it takes a lot of thought and research, and so for him to come in and be talking, especially on contract management and engineering and petroleum science, it's ridiculous. It's impossible to conduct a discussion or an argument with someone at that level. And let me add here. Here's the issue, and I've mentioned it several times. Mr. Jadio, and he said it before, Mr. Jadio, a few I can't remember whether it's the one before this last. Well, not it's not the one yesterday, but it might have been the week before the week or the week before. Mr. Jagio said that when we finish, because these projects, Dr. Hines, remember you've got to there's the capital equipment that you put in up front. You got to buy drill rigs. Each well costs like over 100 million US dollars. So you got drill rigs, you've got the wells, all the costs before you even discover oil. So when you discover oil now, all of that is capital costs. I think the capital cost right now for all 6 projects is about 55 billion US dollars. So now you've got to pay back that cost with the revenues received, right? So there are 2 pieces of cost that you've got to put on your tab every month. So like when you buy a house, right? You've got what is the amortization schedule, and it tells you how much you've got to pay per month for that mortgage until it's finished paid off, right? Well, so that's one cost. But on top of that cost now that you have to pay off, you've got your operation, day-to-day operation costs, like the salaries of people, the fuel, all those subcontracts for local content. So you got to add those 2, and and say, well, okay, the operation cost, it is what it is, and then you add that to the mortgage cost, but you cap that at 75%. So it leaves right now 25% for profit. So that's called profit oil. Now we get 50% of that 25%, right, Dr. Hines? So guess how much we get? 12.5%. Now there's a 2% royalty. So in effect, we get about 14.5% right now. What Mr. Jagdio said was that after we finish paying off that mortgage, we would get 52%, which means that what he's saying, that operation cost will be 0, because the only way you can get 52%, you remember what I told you was the cost oil. It was the mortgage cost for the capital plus the operation cost. So even if you take away the mortgage cost, you still have the operation cost to take care of. So let's say the operation cost is 40%, or even put it the lowest 20%, which is unreasonable. Let's say put it at lowest 20%, Dr. Hines. Operation cost, there's no mortgage cost. You still have to pay. That's not going away until the field is over. You have 20% operating cost. So if you take out 20% out of 100%, you're left with what? 80%. You take 50% out of that, we get 40%. And then you add the 2%, you get 42%. It's impossible to get to 52% because unless the operating cost is 0, and that is the point that I'm making. As a matter of fact, Dr. Hines, when Exxon had put up the billboard all over Guyana with the 52%, I came out and I criticized it openly, even on your show, I think.
Yes, you did.
Well, when even Jagdio himself came back on his show and said, you know what? Because people started calling me, how did you get Jagdio to apologize to you? Jagdio himself said he agrees with Vincent that these were his words, that those billboards are misleading. He himself said that. So it's not only me. He said it though. And when people were pressuring him, including myself, to tell him to tear it down, he said, well, he can't do that. So that's why all of this stuff that is coming out now is just sheer nonsense and propaganda. Well, I don't even think it's propaganda, because I think you have to understand when you're trying to confuse people and propaganda, you've got to understand the issue. But I don't even believe. I think it's ignorance more than anything else.
Ignorance more than anything else. Carlton is saying, Dr. Hines, it's election year, and you need to attract some youths on your program. Carlton, find them and bring them. I would come out of this chair and give them the chair. Carlton, I've been in this business of doing this story here for almost 30 years now. And from Washington, D.C., where I started, to Guyana, the hardest thing to get to come on to these political programs are young people and women. I would give anything, any day, to get a young person every day on this program, to get women. The hardest thing is to get young people and women to come on to political programs. Part of the thing with women is that we have kept them in the back so much that we have not developed them as frontline warriors. And so that's part of the thing with women. With young people, different generations of young people have different priorities. My generation of young people in politics, we went into politics because we thought we could change the world. And Vincent can bear me out here. We felt we could change the world. Oh, power to the revolution.
Absolutely.
The young people not coming into politics for no revolution now, right? Their priorities are changing. I'm not saying their priorities are worse than the priorities of my generation. They're different. They're different. Right? You call them, can you come on to the program, Dr. Hines? You know, them people terrible. Can you believe what they're doing? And so on. Can you come on to the program? Man, I ain't think I'm ready with it yet, you know, and so on and thing, right? No, I'm not beating up young people. I'm just saying that that is the reality, Lester. And so, yes, if you can find the young people and steer them in my direction, I will have them on this program every day. We have people like Young Elson Lowe and some of the young people who have come through on the programs. You all know that. We have pushed them and so on and so forth. But it's not easy getting young people to come into politics in the same way as they came into politics decades ago. Priorities have changed. But bring them and we'll get them on. And so, Doc, I listened to Jack Dale yesterday. I happened to catch the program catch the press conference before my program, which is always not easy, but school is on break now, so I get the time sometimes. And I heard that man talk about his position on the contract that was signed by the coalition. Now, I remember, as Louis Bennett would say, may remembrance remember, when you were one of the few people in the status quo of the government that said that contract is bad. I remember when I was writing in the Chronicle at that time, saying we could get more. So it is not true that all of us who are AP and UAFC, right, went along with the contract. I remember my party with the signing bonus that was being kept a secret, called on the minister at that time, your party leader, at that time, to say, make this thing public. We had a meeting with him. We asked for a meeting and he granted a meeting with us at Rodney House. And we pleaded with him to make the signing bonus public. I'm saying those things to say that it is not true that all of us went along. So you, I remember, said, this thing no regular. All right?
Yeah.
I want to get that out of the way. But there is Jack Deal, who Kitron News has now exposed, it seems, that he gave his blessings to the contract. And now, when he's forced to say whether they're lying on him or not, the man rip apart the contract as though it's the first time hearing about it. Your thoughts?
Well, there's so much of that, and I've been talking about that, and you're absolutely correct. I was the first person that came out and I always point people to, there was a front page article, an interview, an extensive interview, exclusive interview that I did on the Starbuck News, dated February 4th, 2018. I invite people to go there. The headline was the same thing that I said, renegotiate and take a signing bonus of $1 billion. So that's there. That was in 2018. Even when I was working for the government, as you said, in Guyana, I was going on public, whatever it is, and I was publicly criticizing the government, the contract. Here is what this man is now saying. Every day he gets there and he's saying, oh, this was such a bad contract and it has these clauses. But let me remind people again, and we've done this over and over in the show, Dr. Hein, but now that is why I'm glad that these things are coming up. Okay? This man is saying that everything that this contract had in it is that it was the APNU government, the APNU AFC, that put these clauses, these bad clauses in place. He says that in plain language, directly. So let me tell people again. The first contract that was signed, it was signed in 1999 by the Honorable Janet Jagan, 1999, folks. And everything in that 1999 contract, and it's not only that contract, there are a total of 11 contracts. 11, okay, that were signed. Two of those were revisited. Well, two was signed by the government of the APNU government. So you had 9 that was signed before. Nobody talks about that. And Dr. Hines, believe it or not, all of those clauses that they talk about are in those contracts. Those clauses, the stability clause, which says that if you can't, if you change your law of the nation, you've got to find a way to compensate Exxon for whatever impact it may have. Okay? That was in the 1999 contract and the other contract. It's written in different words, but it says the same exact thing. The clause that says 32.1 that says that you have to seek Exxon's approval or consent to renegotiate the contract. They put it in there. This man keeps saying that the only reason why they've got to live with what we put in that contract, every clause, I want them to name one clause that they criticize that they did not write in there before the APNU AFC. One clause that they're criticizing, let them name that clause. And then of course, he comes here now with this. This here took the cake, Dr. Hein, with the tax exemption for Exxon. So yesterday the question was asked, and you can always tell when he became nervous. He started going all over the place.
Yeah.
How did you vote for this clause and for this tax exemption? And he started waffling, and then what came out was even beyond, because you know what this man said? They didn't have a choice because they didn't see the contract. Now, you want to tell me they're representing half of this country, and you're telling me you're going to go sign something like that as important as that, but so you're just signing blindly. So what is your purpose? You're saying, basically, he's saying, well, their vote wouldn't have mattered anyway because they were in the minority. Well, is that what an opposition is supposed to? Which means that you're telling me that your job is not to do anything. That's what it's telling me, that there's even beyond this whole thing about them not even reading to understand what they're signing. He's saying, well, we didn't have an option because our vote wouldn't have mattered anyway. Well, what are you doing in Parliament to represent the people of this country if you're saying, well, our vote don't matter? I mean, so that is the dunderheadedness that we've got to deal with, that came out yesterday. No, I don't mind. You can see, because that's been the tactic to deny everything. But he has gone beyond denial now. Because he denied that, he said they put blame on that the AFC, the APNU AFC government put these clauses in place, which is the first lie, because it's in their 9 contracts that they signed before the AFC, the APNU AFC signed their contract, and they retained those clauses. You blame them for it, which is the first untruthful statement. And then now you even adding on to that to say, well, we didn't read it, but the reason why we didn't even read it is because it came to us late, and we had to vote on it because our vote wouldn't make a difference. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? What is your purpose in parliament then? Well, just stay home. Just stay home then. If what are you getting paid for? If you're just gonna say, well, okay, whatever the government wants, I'm gonna go along, then you don't have any need to be in parliament when you're in opposition. That's basically what he's saying, Dr. Hyde. That's what he's saying.
That's what he's saying. Christopher Thomas. I used to know a good Christopher Thomas, who was the Deputy Secretary General of the OAS. And I know it's not that Christopher Thomas. Christopher Thomas, when you come in on the program, you come to learn or you come to teach. All right? If you come here to interfere with people and talk nonsense, I will take you off the program. All right? I don't mind you coming here and being critical of me or critical of my guests and so forth. But don't come here and calling people idiot and all that kind of stuff, right? I'll block you. Okay? Behave yourself. Doctor, you talk about nervousness. Yeah. One of the nervous moments at yesterday's press conference was when he was directly asked, Jack Dio was directly asked about the possibility of members of his cabinet engaging in business activities that represent a conflict of interest. Jack Dio boiled down to low gravy, and you know what we know, almost stammering. But at the end of the day, basically what the man said is that we're going light. We're going light on members of the cabinet engaging in business. Once they sign up and they sign this form and they present information. He did not categorically say,
yes,
corruption, conflict of interest is unwelcome in this government. He didn't. And I think that was such an important moment that speaks to the political culture of the PPP. Corruption is welcomed. Am I overdoing this thing? Am I taking my anti-Jack Dioism to some ridiculous length?
No, Dr. Hines. I would even make it even more fundamental than that. It is the culture. It is the culture of the PPP. Now, people are here's the that's a simple understanding of this here that people would understand and should be baffled by this type of behavior. This here was that, and a lot was revealed in that nervousness. You see, when you're nervous and you're under pressure to answer questions, things just come out that you don't intend for it to come out, So if you recall, if you go back into the old news, this question I think was even asked of Mr. Indar himself. I can't remember.
Yes.
And he denied that he even owned this company. I think there was something about owning a company or something, right? And that part of it, that's where we were going. But apparently what Mr. Jagdeo has now revealed, that because of that, he called in, because he probably got word. So he called in Indar and said, here, something, you can't do that. You're going to have to give up interest. Interest, doctor, and interest now. He said, you're going to have to give up interest. He said, Indar said he's going to go home, talk to his family. He came back and said he's going to give up interest. Well, apparently what they're talking about interest is giving up ownership of the company. Now, they need to provide that's the first part. But, however, you can still have ownership. Doesn't they realize that when you have stocks in a company, any participation in profit making from that company, you're owning part of that company. That's what, when you buy stocks, that's why it's called shares. Okay? You're a shareholder in a company when you have stocks in it. So what they're allowing is for ownership, for these people to buy stock. That's what he said. He said it's okay, you can declare every year Well, Dr. Hines, let me tell you something. We have to do the same thing in the United States government. And I remember, and you know what the mutual fund is. You know, you buy in them, it got thousands of companies. And we had to submit it to a high-powered team of lawyers every year. And they would scrutinize it. And, you know, every year, because I had, you know, mutual funds. And even though, you know, let's say a company that I may be managing, not, well, not managing, but have some association with in terms of contracts, even if there's a 0.1%, because a lot of times there are thousands of companies, even if I've got 1.1% in that mutual fund that I have no control over in terms of the investment, but if I've got connection to that company somehow indirectly, and I've got shares of even 0.1%, that comes on the question. I've got to go in and explain to them, and if they're not satisfied, you know, I've got to get out of it. So for him to say, well, now you can own stock. If you own stock in shares in a company, Dr., because that's what he's saying, you're going to be looking out for your dollars in that company. And if you got to make decisions, for example, mining, if a mining company comes in and, well, I think he's in construction, I can't remember. But anyway, let's say it's a construction company. We're building bridges and all kinds of stuff, you know, over Guyana. And a company comes in and it's a public company and he buys, it's okay for him to buy stocks in that company, even though he is the one in charge of awarding contracts and deciding how much they should get, and whatever profit they make, he's benefiting from it. So this what he's talking about here is, I mean, it's unbelievable that he would even say something like that. But that's what he said, it's okay for them to still have. He said this. He told NR to give up his interest, but having shares is also interest. You've got control over the company that you might be investing in. So all this thing about reporting to the Integrity Commission and all this kind of stuff, it's a kind of a cop out for him believing that people are stupid and it's gonna go away. That's what it is.
Yeah. And you know, as a country, we have had to grapple, like most post-colonial societies.
Yes.
We have had to grapple with the question of corruption. We have the question of integrity in government. I remember little boy Guyana going before the ombudsman and challenging Mr. Burnham on corruption. And Mr. Burnham came up with a code of conduct that all ministers shall declare their assets before me. And I was a small boy Guyana said, well, who you will declare your assets in front? Are you going to go in front of the mirror and say, my God? I'm saying, and that was in the early 70s. So you're talking about 50 odd years ago that we've been grappling. And I'm saying that 50 years later, we are supposed to have clear legislation, but more than legislation, we are supposed to have clear behavior.
Yes.
That when you are getting into serving government, that you make sure that you have your ducks in line.
Yep.
You know, and so therefore it is amazing to see the PPP really in a sense inviting corruption. Look, you know, the other day I took a taxi to go into town because I don't like to drive into Georgia in the middle of the day. You can't find parking, etc., etc. And I was just going to drop off something. So the taxi man took me and he recognized me. So he said, Doc, I'm going to wait on you and carry you back. So I drop off the thing that I was supposed to drop off. He said, well, Doc, they're close to them by, you know. But me just watch you. And me like what you're doing. I have one contribution to make to the struggle. I said, what is it? He said, you get time? I said, yeah, I get an hour or so. And that man drive me through Greater Georgetown, across from where your office used to be the EPA there.
Yes.
Sophia, he drive me through there, carry me up to Cummins Lodge, and he point out some big building. And the building, they similar in the makeup, and he said, "So minister own this.
Wow.
So minister own this one. You see, all of them look like this. This minister own that one. I'll cross by your office there." He point, and he said, "You see the land there? They earmark the land there next to EPA there for put up big building to rent to white people. It's a big business." It took the man about 2 hours to drive me through. He said, "Me can carry you more." I said, "Mommy, me see enough, me see enough," and so on. So the question of conflict of interest on the part of these ministers is a real question, and it's out in the open. They're building these things near to people where people live. If you come and build a big apartment house next to me, obviously I got to know is who own it. Because what we understand happens is that if you are a minister, when material come for work on a government building, you send some of the material to work on you building.
Sure.
So these chaps are ending up owning these properties without paying a cent to get them built. And Jack Joe is sitting there, in a sense, saying, well, once you declare this and declare that, without getting to the meat of the problem. My brother, this cash grand story.
Yeah, but before we finish there,
yes.
Here's the problem. There are no checks and balances here in this government, Dr. Hines, to start with, because the people who are supposed to enforce the law, they're also involved. Look at, it's not only ministers. Look at Brutus. Look how much wealth. Look. So those are the people who are supposed to enforce the law, but so is this, incestuous kind of a relationship that you have. So there's nothing. That is why the rule of law. That is why the Guyana for 2023, and these are metrics that people ought to pay attention to. By what's the word? I can't remember the exact day, but it's a Washington-based organization that looks at every country, and they give you the rule of law index, corruption index, and that type of stuff. Guyana, Dr. Hines, is ranked 76 out of 143 countries for the 1923 rankings, and then it's divided into you should see how it's divided up into terms of police, corruption, and all this kind of stuff. And you know what's our score? 50 out of 100, 76th place. So that's where they really don't care. They know that there's no accountability. They're gonna fill their pockets before they get out of office. So when they get out of office, they're good. Look at Prattville was another good example of what happened at Prattville. The biggest mansion we have is at Prattville, and who a lot of people were involved there. As a matter of fact, Prattville, I know a lot of people from Plaisance, and they were pretty upset, but they couldn't do a damn thing. My wife is from Plaisance, and they couldn't do anything because that's land that they would have liked to have. But guess what? The people just came in and took it, and they sold it like, it was in the news that a certain minister bought it for a very small amount as a token, and then sold it back for many, many times more. But again, we're getting back to the culture, and then the people who are supposed to enforce the law, it doesn't matter because they're all in collusion there. So that's why I call it, we've got a culture of this government of corrupt practices.
Officer, you're right. You see, I know I wasn't wrong. I know the man who carried me wrong was wrong. When he was leaving so far, he said, "Me gotta carry your Cummins Lodge." And when he carried me to Cummins Lodge and he pointed out them building owned by a certain minister, officer, you wasn't a police or nothing. You did your investigation. It sicks the stomach.
Yeah.
It sicks the stomach.
Yeah.
That kind of corruption.
And give credit to to Aubrey Norton. If you recall, Aubrey says this all the time. He says that he challenged Mr. Jaglio to put his assets on the table in the open, his assets versus how he got to these, well, not how he got to these assets, but the value of his assets compared to the value of the salaries that he's gotten over time. Not obviously, I would do that anytime. Anytime he's ready, I'll put my assets versus my income throughout my entire life. He's challenged Jaglio to do that all the time, but they wouldn't. If I was in Jaglio's place and I know that I'm clean with all the questions, hell, I would have next day I would have done it. But they can't. Why can't they? Why don't they want to take up Mr. Norton's challenge?
Doctor, this cash grant story not going away. Now we're hearing that people register for the cash grant last month or month before, and we got some dead people left the grave and come out and register, and they call the name.
They're calling the names.
Calling the name for the cash grant, and they're hollering from the grave, "Give me data." Doc, Jesus Christ, look. All people say, "Oh God, my belly hurt me. My belly hurt me. My belly hurt me." If this thing weren't so serious, we would make big money with a comedy show in America.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised it's not on a comedy show yet, because this here is a classic comedy show. This whole cash grant thing. You remember? If we just remind people, could you imagine a comedian taking stock of these material? The president comes out instantaneously. Then the vice president comes out. Oh no, 5 months. Then the very next day, it says, well, we're going to change it from household. Well, the first thing they did, they said 200,000 per household, without even knowing how many households they are. They come up with two numbers, but you needed a third number to figure out how you come up with the two numbers. The first thing they said, well, we're going to $100,000 for each household, and then it's going to add up to $60 billion. Well, in order for it to add up to $60 billion, you got to multiply the 100,000 by the number of households. When they were asked how many households, they didn't know. But so now when they got pressure now, when the opposition came on and said this doesn't make any sense, it needs to be to each. They come out, well, okay, it's going to be 100,000, and you're gonna get it from instantaneously. Now you're gonna get it by November. You're gonna get it by December. You're gonna get it by the end of the year. All kinds of foolishness. And now here we are. And then when you hear they did not even have the money in the budget to do it instantaneously. Because the prime minister comes and says, well, it's going to be next. We're going to have to put money, half of the whatever the number is, into next year's budget, which means that when they said that they were going to get it to you this year, it was a blatant lie. They didn't have money there to get it to you. And then, of course, they were going to get an app for you to register. And then, of course, what you're talking about there now, they're calling out names from the grave. No, but here why this is so serious, though, Dr. Hines. If this can happen in the open like this, what do you think will happen on that voters list?
That's it.
What do you think would happen on that voters list? That is secret, and you're not seeing the voters list. Basically, but this here is in open, and if this is happening in the open, what do you think is going to happen on that voters list?
Dr. Adams, what those people did with that registration is create their own voters list.
Yep.
And they're going to take that information and they are going to correspond it with the voters list. And they will see who they are on that list. And with all those people who come from overseas during Christmas and they register, that is for electoral purpose. As saying to Guyanese people, especially black people, because Teacher George Young, he says sometimes black man too licorice.
Yeah.
All we see is the couple cents. And look, I'm not saying that, don't take your couple cents, it's your own.
Yeah.
But understand what this is about. This is not about giving you money. This is about paying a bribe of $100,000
Yep.
in order to get a fraudulent voters list. And in order to get a new list from which you will do your voter impersonation.
Yep.
And
Because,
we've been saying it from the beginning. I love the media. I love the media. You know, one of the things I was always encouraged to do when I was in college was to do political communication. I never got around to doing it. Dr. Eddie Green always said, David, you know, you'll understand politics, you understand communication. Political communication is the way to go, and so on. But here's the story. I love the media. But in any other country in the world, you say you do registration for a cash grant, and the registration to last week, and a man died 20 years ago, and he on your registration list. In any other part of the world, that would be news for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks straight.
Yep.
There is a way in which this country, at the institutional level, has really those people have really, in a sense, given.
Yes.
The normalization of fraud by the PPP.
Yes.
Because it goes back to them in 2020, jumping the gun and saying the PPP win the election because they see Mr. Mingo do something. And when we say, prove it, unconstitutionally, they went to recount. But God not sleep. In that recount, it showed who the real riggers were.
Yep.
And all the international community, the media in Guyana, and civil society, and so on, all of them left with the face with dirty on it. Because they call fraud on the coalition. And when fraud watched them in the face and said, look me there, the shame. And to this day, they do not go after fraud. Here's what they ask us every day. Well, if you don't get biometrics and a clean voters list, are you going to contest the election? There's a non-question.
It is. It's to detract. It's to distract. That's what it is, Dr. It's to change. It's to change the conversation from the real issue. That's what it is. That's what it is.
That's right. These people have used this distribution of the cash grant in order to create an alternative list that they can use the information on that list to manipulate the real voting on election.
But here's why it is so obvious, Dr. Hines, because they still cannot answer the question. You already have a list of people, all government employees, all pensioners, where you transfer money to them. Why aren't you to get them out? All you got to do, you got that list already. Why are you making a new list? These people got to go and do over it. And then they're taking your ID card with your picture and the back of the card. Why do you need all of this information? The only thing I can say is to me anyway, the only thing I can say is to duplicate that card somewhere.
That's right.
And so that's what it is. You cannot, up to now, they cannot answer the plain old simple question. Why do you have to get the current people that you pay every month? You've got all this information already. All you got to do is say $100,000. Wherever you used to pay your salary, that's where it's going. What is so? And then on top of that, besides all of that, it shows the heartlessness of this government to even the senior citizens of this government. They've got these old people coming from all over the country. You know, I see people coming from East Bank. They got to get taxi. They get registered. They tell them to come here. When they come here, they tell them, well, they named up on the list, but the money ain't come from or they got to go to another place. They got to take another taxi all over the place. So these people come in there since 3 and 4 in the morning. I mean, it's the suffering and the heartlessness the callousness of this government, besides all the other stuff that we, it's just unbelievable.
Doctor, you entitled to the 100,000. I entitled to 100,000. We ain't got to Guyana for collect 100,000.
Yep.
I want Jack Deo and Ali and the others. Tell me what they're doing with me 100,000.
That's right.
And you 100,000.
And my 100,000. Yes.
What they're doing with it? All house upon all house, corruption upon corruption.
Yeah.
By the time we meet again next week, Doc, it would be budget day. Budget day.
Yes. So that would be the other day. Yep.
Anything that you are watching for in
Yes. I am watching for, because I know where they're gonna go. It's gonna continue, Dr. Hines. They really do not care. You know where most of it is gonna go again. They've already started preparing you for it. The more they're gonna go back, most of it is gonna go back into infrastructure, building roads and bridges. These things that do not last for even a few days. And guess who's gonna be getting that money? They already started preparing you for it. You know what they said? I heard it might have been Mr. Jaggi yourself. How do you? They move. They're so slithery. When they're being criticized for giving people contracts who don't know anything about the contract, now they're saying, could you believe what the latest is now, Dr. Hines? How do we expect these people to grow in their profession if they do not learn on the job? So that's the latest. So they're hiring people now. So that's their latest excuse. And so they're preparing you now in this budget for a big budget with under the cover that now, hell, you know what? We've admitted that a lot of this is going into waste and incompetence because the people we are putting in place don't have a clue, and we're giving them experience on the expense of the taxpayers' dollars that could be going to paying teachers, for health care, and all these, and those type of necessary expenses for the people who need it. Yeah, that's so. Again, it's gonna be. Last year it was 58%, and this year it wouldn't surprise me if it's still in that ballpark. Whereas the government employees, they're gonna get their paltry 8% or 10% of whatever it is. And by the way, when they get their 8 or 10%, is not the same equivalent of the 8 or 10% of the ministers who are making, tens of times more than they're making. Even with the 8 or 10%, the ministers and especially the president, we calculated his take on this 8%. Why don't they at least save a little face and say, well, you know what? We as ministers are not even going to accept any pay raises. But because you remember what they did when they beat the living daylights out of the coalition, and by the way, I was one of those also who came out and criticized that 50%. So let me put it on the table. But they came in and they bashed it, and it made a lot of difference in the general election, because they used that and hang it like an albatross over the opposition neck. But then they promised that when they get into office, they're going to remove it from their salaries. And until now, not only are they not removing it, they're taking an increase on top of it.
On top of it.
On top
of it. On top of it.
That's what we're dealing with.
On top of it. On top of it. No, well, I suppose you yourself laugh when the vice president said they're putting money aside for refurbishing the burial grounds. No, doctor. I
take care of them dead people if the name showing up.
I guess they're thanking the dead people. Now, I live in a village. We get 2 burying grounds. And run out of space. They bury people on the walkway, pathway. So we do have a problem with there. But that event there about the burial grounds, part of it is paying the dead for helping them. But it's really to get them young boys in them village pork up by we gonna get contract for the burying ground.
Yeah.
We don't get contract for the burying ground, while other people getting contract for the bridge.
That's right.
And the stadium.
That's right.
And they're pointing contract for bearing ground. And I want the bearing ground
And
to
digging
clean
drains
and drain.
and cleaning up. Yep.
I don't mind that. But you're using that for them little by, telling them, here, you get a record, you get a prison record. We gonna make that go away.
Yep.
Right? Here is a $2 million contract.
Yep.
And Doctor, God, the view of us black people that we like stretch beyond, and you can give me anything and get your way with me. It's so stinking that a government is doing it.
Yep. Yep.
You see, this is not an individual walking off the street and saying, black people, all you got to do is give them the liquor and a couple $1,000 and you get them. This is not an individual doing it. This is your government, which is acting on that lawless view of the population. And yes, some black people are falling for it. Some are playing the game. But that you and I can't do it.
Yep.
You and I can't play the game. We have to call it for what it is.
Absolutely.
And we are not telling black people don't make a hustle, don't sing. Jack Dio talk about the amputee man who figured his system out, and he wants something. He write to 8th minister, and then he write to Azadin. And so the man figure out the kind of Jack Dio, he says, how to game the system. Well, it's the gaming system that you put in place.
He admitted it there. He admitted that there is a gaming system. Absolutely. Absolutely. But you know, Dr. Hines, and we always say on this show, I really sympathize with a lot of people in Guyana. And you see what has happened here, okay? Things are so bad, and people are desperate to provide for their families. And if they do not go along with it, they, you know, so they it's not that they most of them want to do it, but in desperation. But this government is so immoral,
yes,
that they take advantage of the desperate nature of most people, and they take advantage of that and exploit it. So that is what we've got. It's an exploitation of people who are not in a position to do any better. I'm sure they would like. And what it is, it becomes part of your way of life after a while.
Yes.
And you can, and that is exactly what is happening in Guyana right now. And that is why it's so important that we that this government change. And I always go back to Jack Dew when he stopped doing it, since I and others have criticized him. He used to get on his show every Thursday and said, well, the only thing that the opposition wants to do with the money is feed the people. They used to say that.
Yes.
Well, that to me, I mean, that's a resounding statement in terms of, him exposing exactly how is, what the mindset of that party is. It's not about poor people wanting to eat and find a place to live and live a comfortable life. It's about that 1% or even less than 1% who are enjoying the hog of the money. All of them, they're taking all of the money, and all those contractors, and like you said, they're all getting they're building the big mansions, they're building stadiums and all of these nice facilities. And in the meantime, they're learning how to, it's part of your profession. But then guess what? They've got our folks going and cleaning out bell grounds, But that's how it is. So the only thing that can happen just to save these folks, because they're really, most of them are not in a position, because they can't rebel, they can't say anything.
That's right.
Or else, we know Jadion in one of his programs going way back had even said that he admitted that he is vindictive. I couldn't believe the man quote. That's a quote. He said that something to the effect, that I'm very vindictive, something to that effect. And we know what it is. So that's the position that these people are in. They've got to do whatever it takes to survive.
Dr. Vincent Adams here on a Friday evening. Dr. Adams, always a pleasure having you on. We are definitely going to see each other on Sunday because we have a lot to talk about cricket management, cricket governance, the two-tier system that these people are proposing now, the way in which India, a post-colonial society, now with some power in cricket, is behaving just like the old colonials of yesterday. We have to call that out. India should really be there protecting the interests of other post-colonial cricket playing countries. Not behaving like colonials.
No.
And so we're going to talk some more about that.
Definitely.
On Sunday, and I'm very glad Clive Lloyd lent his voice.
That's right.
Because his voice carries weight. In circles, and I don't think sometimes we in the Caribbean understand the capital we have in people like Lloyd and Richards and some of the old timers who are still around. That emotional point that I can feel his emotion. Look what we have given to the cricket world.
Absolutely.
The world of cricket, India would not be where it is today had it not been for us.
Nope.
When we were dealing with fast bowlers, India used to start with Gavaskar opening, bowling one over to get the shine off the
Soltar. You remember Soltar?
Now India is a fast bowling giant.
That's right.
And it is because of the example of the West Indies.
Sure.
And India is behaving in that way. I know I might be offending some Indian Guyanese, but what's new, right? We got to call and Doc, while I can't trace a little Indian in me because I never look for Doc, I can't trace it.
I'm 50%.
He's 50%. He's 50%. So so we're gonna talk about that on Sunday on the cricket show. On this whole question of the two-tier system. We talk about our own governance, and we have to call a spade a spade. West Indies is losing partly because at no point can we put our best 11 on the park, whether it's in T20 or ODI. What's with ODI? Or Test cricket, right? We are not able to put our best 11 on the field of play because of where they've taken the cricket world. All right? And it's money. Look at what Irfan Ali and Jack Dio that did Christmas time. Came up with this big party, global league, because somebody see a way to make money. That's what it is. They look at the CPL and they see the amount of money they make because people go out to the CPL, they get sponsorship for it, and it's more money. Not about taking some of that CPL money and demanding that that money be put in to developing our cricket infrastructure, but they want to make more money. And that is what our government is part of. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Thank you, my brother. And I'll see you on Sunday.
Anytime.
Dr. Vincent Adams there, always bringing to bear on this program a certain kind of professionalism, a certain kind of integrity, and clearly he has the PPP running up the wall because they're trying to get out of this idle story. All right? They're trying to pass the blame. And people like Adams are on them all the time. And unlike Brother Glenn Lal, who Jack Dio shamefully and shamelessly tried to say he can't read and write. If I put the study in front of Glenn Lal, he won't be able to read it. He can't say that about Vincent Adams. And it tear the hell out of them that our mama, our daddy, our granny, our auntie send away to school. We didn't know it then, but now we know it. He can't tell Vince Adams that if I put this in front of you, you can't read it. I think it's insultive to Glenn Lal. Whatever Glenn Lal education background, Glenn Lal is making a contribution to Guyana now. He's making a contribution to Guyana now. And to say to the man he can't read and write, when you can barely read and write, then you can barely read and write, you're cussing Glenn Lal that he can't read and write. Thank God for me auntie, me mama, and boxing people, me go to school. And I spent some time at the bottom house, but most of the time I used to go upstairs in the class. So also for Vincent Adams, that they can't tell away dunce. Shame on Jack Dio. Shame on Jack Dio. Because Jack Dio got to school under Burnham. He went to multilateral school that Burnham built. He's a recipient and beneficiary of free education under Burnham and the PNC. And to be cussing Glenn Lal, that Glenn Lal can't read and write, which is not obviously not true. I'm sure Glenn Lal can read and write, but we know where he's going with that. To be cussing Glenn Lal, because Glenn Lal has carved out a niche for himself. You don't got to give Jackie jacket. Glenn decided that the oil business, the oil issue, he taking that as he baby. God bless him. God bless him. God bless him. But deal with the man on the issues he's raising. We want about who can read and write, and who can't read and write. Look in your own house, Jack Dio. I mean your political house, Freedom House. Look and talk about who can read and write there. Thank God. You can't tell Vincent Adams. You can't tell Aubrey Norton. You can't tell Nigel Hughes. You can't tell Takuma Ogunse. You can't tell Kathy Hughes. You can't tell Amanza Walton. You can't tell David Hines that we can't read and write. Wheel and come again, as the Jamaicans would say. You have to wheel and come again. Shame, shame, shame. There are many ways in which Glenn Lal can read and write more than you, Jack Dio. He can read and write more than you. There are many ways. Reading and writing is not just arithmetic and English and thing. There are many ways in which Glenn Lal get more general knowledge, as we used to call it when I was a schoolboy. We had a subject called general knowledge. There are many ways in which Glenn Lal got more general knowledge than you, Ali, and all of you all put together. Anyhow, I can. Nice weekend. See you all on Sunday, the cricket people. And I'll back here on Monday to put more fire in their ass. More fire in their behind.